All right, chapter 7, how to nurture that motivating feeling. Motivation is more than just a reason for doing something. When we use the word in conversation, we often mean a feeling of enthusiasm or drive that fluctuates just like any other. Some things nurture that feeling, others flatten it. What things do you do that are often followed by a feeling of motivation and energy? Science tells us about the things that will work for most people. But the detail you have to establish from looking at your own life with curiosity adds significant value. You cannot change something that you are not aware of. So, spending time observing and documenting the thing that you are trying to tackle is hugely important and gives you the best chance of generating that feeling of motivation more of the time. Here are some things that invite that feeling to be present. Move your body. Motivation does not come from a specific location in the brain. It is not a fixed part of your personality. It is also not an essential tool that we use to make us move. It is most often a consequence of that movement. But what if you had no motivation to exercise? Perhaps the key to making exercise a sustainable part of everyday life is to find a form of movement that you can begin even when your motivation is low. Research shows that even doing small amounts of exercise is better than nothing, and anything more than your usual amount of movement will help boost your willpower. Find something that feels easy, something that brings you joy, something that feels like precious time out, rather than another boring job that has to get done. Add in friends, good music, and anything that helps you look forward to it each day rather than dread it. Adding in some form of exercise, however moderate, will pay you back in feelings of motivation. You may have to use the strategy of acting opposite to the urges because you won't feel like working out. But the impact this simple action will have on that can't be bothered feeling for the rest of the day is unmatched. Make this one thing happen, and you are setting yourself up to win. Staying connected with the goal. In therapy, we often set goals with people and help them to work out how they are going to achieve them. But the real work happens when things slip off track. This is the point at which those without support might be vulnerable to giving up. But we need to get to work using the setbacks to strengthen the future. If we can better understand what caused the failure and that getting back on track is part of the process, then we are in a good position to predict when it can happen again and steer around those challenges in the future. I think one of the reasons that some of my clients say that they feel so much more motivated after an appointment is because they spend time reconnecting with their goals. If that thing that we are working on is not fresh in our minds, we can quickly lose momentum. Whether you're working on improving mood or any other aspect of your well being, it is paramount that you stay connected with your goals because they will demand constant nurturing. Return to them on a daily basis. You can do this through journaling. It doesn't have to be a hugely time consuming task. It can be a 1 minute at the beginning of your day, listing the one or two things you will be doing that day towards your goal. Then at the end of the day, writing a few lines to reflect your experience. This kind of task is easy to maintain because it doesn't require too much time, maybe a couple of minutes at most. It ensures that you are accountable to yourself every day and keeps you focused on your goals, keeping it small. Any big task will invite that can't be bothered feeling, so keep it small and keep it focused. People transform their lives with therapy, but that doesn't happen overnight. They don't return to their second appointment problem free and with an entirely new mindset. Individuals take home just one task at a time and focus on that. We can only focus on one thing at a time, and we only have limited ability to do things that we don't feel like doing. But of course, most of us don't stick to this. We can see that life needs an overhaul, and when we try to do that one big transformation all at once, we expect too much of ourselves and then fall into despair when we burn out or give up. When that happens, we are less likely to try again. When motivation for a long-term goal dips, it helps to have small rewards along the way. Not so much external rewards, but internal ones. That emotional pat on your back you provide for yourself when you congratulate yourself for your efforts and acknowledge that it has been worth it because you are heading in the right direction. Doing this helps you to lean back into effort, knowing that you are on your way towards the changes you want to see. When we acknowledge the progress and the small victories along the way, we can start to recognize that our efforts can influence our world. Feeling that we have an agency in this way helps us to feel energized to keep going. This is a great reason to start small and to develop new habits, ensuring that each one gets embedded. Once you sustain the habit of prioritizing your health behaviors, they will sustain you. Resisting temptation. Sometimes we are trying to build motivation to help us take action. But change can also demand the willpower to resist temptation and the urges to do things that will take us in the opposite direction of our goals. I must have been around the age 3 or 4 when I visited my grandparents' house and walked into the garden to find my grandfather using a garden trimmer. Something wasn't working right, so he flipped the tool upside down and started pulling bits of grass out from between the blades. Then he turned to me and said, "Whatever you do, do not press that red button." I sat on the grass next to the red button on the side of the trimmer and fixed my gaze on it. Do not press it. Do not press it. I wonder if it was one of those buttons that gave a satisfying click when you pressed it. Don't press it. It looked really smooth along the top. Don't press it. Like a magnet, my hand reached out and pressed that red button. The trimmer instantly responded with a loud noise as the blade swung into action. As luck would have it, no fingers were lost that day, but I did learn a new cuss word. Focusing on the thing I was not supposed to turned out to be not so helpful strategy. So what does happen when positive change demands that we resist temptation? One of the biggest factors is managing stress. The physiology of self-control is optimal when stress is low and heart rate variability is high. Heart rate variability is a measure of the variation in between each heartbeat. So it tells us how much your heart rate changes throughout the day. You might notice that when you're getting out of bed in the morning, your heart speeds up. And when you run for the bus, then it gradually comes back down again. This means that your body gears up for the action that you need and calms the body back down for rest and recovery. But when we are under lots of stress, the heart rate may remain high throughout the day, reduced variability. When it comes to resisting temptation and maximizing our willpower, we need that capacity to calm the body and the mind. Anything that increases the stress is going to have a negative impact on our ability to make wise choices for our future. Stress increases the likelihood that we will instead act based upon how we feel right now and sabotage our goals. So if you're sleep deprived, depressed, anxious, or not eating well, your heart rate variability goes down, along with your chances of sticking to your goals. Whether you're trying to give up smoking or unhealthy foods, or just trying to regulate your emotions in healthier ways, when it comes to relieving stress and increasing your capacity for willpower, exercise is a top choice. It has both an immediate effect and a long-term impact. So whatever change you are working on, increase your level of activity, even in a small way. It's a great way of strengthening your willpower to keep up. Another big player in managing stress and the ability to make wise decisions, sleep. You only need one bad night's sleep to struggle with increased stress, trouble concentrating, and low mood the next day. Self-control takes energy, and if you haven't had enough sleep, your brain has less access to that energy and becomes more vulnerable to high stress reactions, squashing your capacity to control your actions. Changing your relationship with failure. Something that can zap motivation is a prospect of failure. but that depends on the relationship we have with failure. If slipping up and going off the tracks means we engage in vicious self attack and relentless self criticism, we are likely to feel ashamed and defeated. If we associate failure with worthlessness, then we are starting anything new is going to feel overwhelming and procrastination will be front and center. We protect ourselves from the psychological threat of shame by sabotaging the process before it gets started. Shame is not as helpful for motivation as you might think. When we get caught in self criticism and shame, we feel inadequate, defective, and inferior. When we feel that way, we want to hide, get smaller, and disappear. It produces urges to escape and avoid rather than to dust ourselves off and try again. In fact, it is so painful that it induces strong urges to block that feeling, which is risky for anyone living with addiction. So if we want to persist at something and feel motivated to keep trying, we have to think carefully about how we respond to failure along the way. If there is ever resistance in therapy, it is when you explore the idea of being self-compassionate. I hear things like, I will lose my drive, become lazy. I will never achieve anything. I can't just let myself off the hook like that. Most people are shocked and surprised to find out that self-criticism is more likely to lead to an increase in depression rather than motivation. Self-compassion, on the other hand, treating yourself with kindness, respect, honesty, and encouragement after a failure, is associated with increased motivation and better outcomes. Try this. If we are not aware of our self-criticism and the impact it is having on our fear of failure and motivation, then is it much harder to change it. Use these prompts to reflect on the way you talk to yourself after a setback. When you experience failure, what does your self-criticism look like? What emotions are attached to it? Do you suppose that the failure reveals something about your inadequacy or incompetence as a person? Do you notice any shame or hopelessness associated with that? What coping strategies tend to follow that self-criticism? How does that impact on your original goals? Think of a time when you failed at something and someone responded to you with kindness and encouragement. How did that feel? How did that help you to try again and succeed? Toolkit! How to respond to failure with compassion and accountability so you get back on track. Bring to mind a recent memory of a failure or setback. Then work through the following exercise. Number 1. Notice what emotions are brought up by that memory and where you feel them in your body. Number 2. How did the self-criticism sound? What words and phrases came up? How did they influence how you felt? Number 3. How did you then respond to the feelings? Number 4. Bring to mind someone that you love or respect. If they experience the same failure, how might you have responded to them differently? Why would you have shown them that respect? Number 5. How would you want them to perceive the setback in order to get them back on track? Chapter summary. While we can't control the feeling of motivation, these are the things we can do to increase the chances of feeling them more often. Physical movement cultivates the feeling of motivation. Small amounts are better than nothing and can help build momentum. Staying connected with your goals helps to keep triggering moments of increased motivation. Small and consistent beats one-off grand gestures. Learning to rest and replenish between stressful situations helps to maximize willpower. Shame is not as helpful for motivation as you might think. Changing your relationship with failure will help your motivation. Chapter 8. How do you make yourself do something when you don't feel like it? No matter how much we reduce our stress and cultivate motivation, it can be fleeting. It comes and goes, so we cannot rely on it always being there. And there will always be things that we will never feel like doing. Tax returns, insurance renewals, taking out the bins. How do we make these happen, even when a part of us doesn't want to? Feelings are often accompanied by urges. These urges are suggestions, nudges, persuasions, telling us to try this or that, to relieve the discomfort that we feel, or to seek the reward that we anticipate. While those urges can be powerful, we don't have to do what they say. Opposite action. When we were children, my sisters and I would share a packet of Polo mints and compete for whoever could go the longest without crunching the mint. A challenge that is more difficult than it sounds. The urge to crunch the mints feel almost undeniable at the time. I demanded intense concentration and focus, and as soon as you get distracted or let your guard down, your brain will take over on autopilot for you, and the mint was history. If you try that game, you would notice that your awareness focuses on your experience. You get to observe the sensation of an urge, and when you create the gap between the urge and the action. Simply by paying attention, you get to choose whether you will go on that urge or go against it. When the task is as simple as holding back from crunching a mint, all you need is a bit of competitive sibling rivalry to keep you on task. When we are trying to tackle much stronger urges towards ingrained patterns of behavior that come along with the intense emotional states, the challenge is much harder. The skill of acting opposite to an urge to instead build a behavior that is more in line where you want to go is a key skill that people can learn in therapy. The opposite action skill is a deliberate attempt to take an action that is opposite of what the emotion is telling you to do. This is especially helpful when your coping strategies tend to cause you harm. Mindfulness is a key component of this skill. Paying attention to our experience and the thoughts, emotions, and urges that come with it allows us to pause for a just long enough to make an informed, sometimes pre-planned decision about what to do next. This means we can act based on our values rather than our emotions. The pain barrier. The best strategy for the motivation is to take motivation out of the equation. There are things we do every day, whether we like to or not. For example, in the morning, you don't ask yourself whether you had the motivation to clean your teeth. It's just something you do. It is a habit so well practiced that you don't need to think about it anymore. You just do it. The same reason that it is because it has been a non-negotiable part of your daily routine for most of your life. Imagine your brain is a jungle. Imagine your brain is like a jungle. For each action that you take, the brain has to make connections or pathways between different areas. When you repeat an action on a regular basis over a long period of time, like cleaning your teeth, those pathways become well trodden and established. Those smooth, wide paths become easier to access so that your brain can do much of that action without you having to consciously think about doing it. But when you start something new, you have to carve out a fresh path, sometimes from scratch. That takes huge amounts of conscious effort. And if you don't use that path often enough, it will always be effortful. Anytime you're under stress, your brain will automatically choose the easiest route, which is a well-trodden path. But if you can repeat that new behavior as often as you can, for enough times, then the new habit is established and it becomes easier to use when you need it most. Anytime that you are under stress, your brain will automatically choose the easiest route, which is a well-trodden path. But if you repeat that new behavior as often as you can for enough times, then a new habit is established and it becomes easier to use it when you need it. Here are a few tips on how to establish a new habit. Make the new behavior as easy as possible to do, especially in the moments when you feel not like taking action. Set up your environment in a way that supports your new change or behavior. In the early stages of this change, you cannot rely on a habit. Make clear plans and set reminders if necessary. Add in a mix of short-term and long-term goal rewards. Internal reward works better than external ones. So we don't need trophies as much as we need internal celebration and acknowledgement that we are on the right track. Get clarity on why you are making this change and why it matters so much to you. You can use the value exercises in this book to help with that. Establish this change as a part of your identity. This is how you do things now. How to persist for the long haul. Over the years, psychology research has challenged the idea that success is all down to innate talents and has shown that grit. And in particular, perseverance play a vital role in our ability to succeed. But how do we achieve that kind of stamina that we need to be able to preserve even in the face of setbacks? Something that many people learn the hard way is that it doesn't mean just continuing to drive forward until you burn out. When we are working on the long-term goals and making changes that we do not want to maintain, we have to learn to counterbalance the stress of effort with the replenishment of rest. We don't need to always be working or always feel energized and refreshed. We need to be able to listen to the body and step back from the effort so that we are ready to drive forward once again. Just as elite athletes may nap in between training sessions and professional singers rest their voices by going days without speaking, we need to recognize that regular rest and replenishment is crucial if we want to preserve anything for the long haul. But not all breaks are equal. Most days are broken up by the quiet, sometimes boring moments in between periods of intense work and effort. But if we use those in between moments to clear emails, scroll through social media, or get a few things done, the body and the brain will not be returning to a state to recharge. So the next time you reach for your phone to fill in the 15 minutes between meetings, why not step outside for some fresh air, or find space to close your eyes for a moment instead? We also need to make use of small rewards as we work on big goals. When we break down the big challenges into smaller tasks and reward ourselves for reaching those milestones, we get the benefit of small dopamine hits along the way. Dopamine not only gives us a little buzz that feels rewarding, it also drives us to look ahead to the next milestone and motivates us to keep driving forward. It enables us to imagine how we might feel once we accomplish the challenge faced and triggers desire and enthusiasm. So building in those small rewards along the way helps to refuel your desire to keep the end goals to your capacity to preserve. Let's say you're trying to run further than you ever have. When you start to feel tired, you tell yourself that you're going to get back to the end of this road. When you do, you mentally give yourself a pat on the back for achieving it. You see it as a sign that you are on the right track. The internal reward gives you that dopamine release. This suppresses the noradrenaline that causes you to give up. As a result, you get an extra boost to keep going for a little bit longer. This is not the same as positive self-talk. You focus on a small specific goal, and the accomplishment of it means that you are heading in the right direction of your ultimate goal. So when the task ahead feels like a mountain to climb, you don't look up at the peak. You narrow your focus and set yourself the challenge to make it to that next ridge. When you get there, you allow yourself to absorb that feeling of being on your way. Then you go again. Gratitude. A gratitude practice can be a powerful tool for long-term goals that demand persistent effort. Turning your attention to gratitude self-generates those internal rewards that replenish and restore your capacity to keep returning to the effort that is required of you. A simple shift of language can help us turn towards gratitude. For example, try switching to I have to with I get to. As previously mentioned, we also practice gratitude in a more formal way by sitting down with pen and paper and writing down the things we feel grateful for each day. When we do that, we are turning our attention on purpose in a way that shifts our emotional state. But it is not only that immediate impact on our emotions that we gain. When we practice gratitude on a regular basis, we are repeating an action. As described previously, the more we repeat an action, the easier it becomes for the brain to do less effort in the future. Almost like a mental muscle, putting the reps in each day makes it much easier to think in a helpful way when we might need it in the future. Pre-planning. In therapy, we often create crisis planning with people. Sometimes those are about staying safe in life or death situations. At other times, they are to prevent relapse of addiction or getting off track with a goal at a time when they might be vulnerable to giving up. You can make use of this to improve your chances of sticking to any plan. Look ahead at the change you want to make. Write down all the potential hurdles that cause you to get off track. For each hurdle, make a plan of action about what you will do to prevent those hurdles from causing you to get off track or to give up on your goals. Engineer the situation in advance to make acting in line with your values and goals as easy as possible, and sabotaging those goals on emotional urges as difficult as possible. For example, if you want to get up on time every day, put the alarm clock just outside of your room so you have no choice but to get up. If you can anticipate the situations that may be difficult and have a plan in place to deal with them, you won't have to think on your feet and wrestle with the temptation or motivation at a time when you may feel vulnerable. This is just who I am now, returning to your identity. As motivation rises and falls along the journey of change, returning to your sense of self and the identity you want to create can help you to persist when motivation has disappeared. If you see yourself as someone who looks after your dental hygiene, you pick up a toothbrush every day, whether you feel like it or not, because it's just what you do. Our sense of identity does not have to entirely be fixed by what is laid out for us early in life. We continue to create and build on that identity throughout life with everything that we do. When our goals are underlined by our intention to become the person that we want to be, or even better, when we have decided that this is who we are now, then we act in line with that even on the days when motivation is low. For more on how to steer your sense of identity, see Chapter 33 on how to work out what matters. Toolkit, Future Self Memory, and journaling improves your chances of making better choices. Spend time imagining your future. When we create a vivid image of ourselves in the future, the easier it is to make choices in the here and now that will benefit your future. Think about yourself at a point in the future and how you might feel about the choices that you have made. What have you said yes to, and what have you said no to? How will those choices have affected your life? Which of those choices and actions do you think will you be most proud of? When will you reach that time in the future, and what will you be focusing on? How will you feel about your past self when you look back? The pros and cons from dialectical behavioral therapy, DBT. DBT is a psychological therapy that helps people to find a safe way to manage intense emotions. But the skills taught in DBT can be useful in many aspects of life, including those days when we are trying to stay on track with our goals but don't feel motivated. Here is one of those skills. While it is helpful to consider the future that we want, it is also helpful to look to the future we don't want. In therapy, some people spend time exploring in detail the pros and cons of both having to stay the same and working hard on change. You can use the table below to try for yourself. It pays to spend time being honest with yourself about the true extent of the cost of things remaining as they are. While change inevitably has disadvantages, we may have to tolerate distress and endure discomfort in our efforts. They may be outweighed by the price we pay for staying as we are. This can be a valuable exercise to come back to when we start feeling like giving up on a positive life change or getting off track. So change the pros and cons, keeping things the same, pros and cons. Try this. Building on your identity with intention takes some thought and conscious effort. Try sitting down with a pen and paper to write out some of these answers to these questions. Better still, use a journal and keep coming back to your responses whenever you are working on the life change. What is the larger overall change I am trying to make? Why is this change so important to me? What kind of person do I want to be as I face this challenge? How can I approach this challenge in a way that would make me feel proud when I look back at this period of my life, regardless of the outcome? What are those smaller goals that I need to achieve along the way? How would I face those days when motivation is low? Am I listening to my body and what it needs? Chapter summary. We cannot rely on motivation to be there all the time. We can practice acting in opposition to urges so that we can act in line with our values rather than how we feel right now. Repeat a new behavior enough times and it will become a habit. For any big goals, rest and replenishment along the way is vital. Just ask any athlete. Make use of small rewards along the way.